Okay, Bio 30. So this is now topic 2 of our homeostasis unit. We are going to go through the nervous system. I'll probably split this into 2 videos, I imagine, and we'll talk about what the nervous system is, its relation to the endocrine system and hormones, and how nerves and neurons work. So the nervous system is vitally important. Your entire brain is made up of billions of neurons. Not all animals have a brain. Some have a much simpler nervous system than that. And nerves transmit information super fast. Um, when we look at different organisms, you can have something as simple as nerve cells, and that could be their nervous system. You could have nerve nets, which are sort of complex um, arrays of nerves and neurons sort of interjoined, or you can have a very complex brain. And then among brains, you have more complex brains and less complex brains. So the nervous system at its core can be quite variant for sure. Now, we've already mentioned that the nervous and endocrine systems have a very important link to each other. And in fact, they work together to maintain that homeostatic condition in the body where the body is happy at baseline. Um, so the nervous system is much more immediate. It's faster than the endocrine system with its hormones. The neurotransmitters of the nervous system are called electrical signals, and this allows for things to be very quick. So we can have a sensory input, like the rabbit going, "Oh crap, I'm being chased," because I hear the predator coming after me, and then the motor response is the rabbit running away very quickly. Um, Maybe you hear a sound and you turn your head to hear it, to see it, to find out where it's coming from. Maybe you feel something sharp or something hot or something cold. That's all a nervous system response. It's sensory input integrated into your brain, or maybe not your brain at all. Maybe it's only integrated by your spinal cord. We'll talk about reflex arcs and how that works. And then you do some sort of a response, a motor response, typically in reaction to it. You've got senses, you've got your brain and your spinal cord, and then you've got your muscles or your glands. So the divisions of the nervous system, well, the nervous system, and this is a really important little chart. So I'll pause on after we're done here, and I'll let you kind of take a look and maybe make a note of this yourself or draw the diagram out. But within the nervous system, you've got the central nervous system and then the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system is split up into very specifically the brain and the spinal cords. You've got your brain, you've got your spinal cord. That's the CNS, the central nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is everything outside of the brain and spinal cord. We split this up into somatic nerves and autonomic nerves. Somatic nerves are divided into sensory and motor, so things I feel and then things that control things that I do. These are under voluntary control. So somatic nerves are voluntary. Autonomic nerves, think automatic, they are involuntary. They can be either the sympathetic or the parasympathetic nervous system. So I'm going to pause this video, or I'll let you pause this video, and you can maybe draw this out and make a note of this somewhere, because we'll kind of follow along each of these as we go. Okay, so the central nervous system is your brain and spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system is everything else. Now, your nervous system is going to be made up of glial cells, which are non-conducting cells, and they're important for metabolism in the nervous system. They hold sort of neurons close together. They're kind of like the glue. Um, and so neurons are sort of held together by glial cells, these non-conducting cells. Neurons themselves are conducting, and they have to be conducting. So they carry this electrical impulse throughout the length of the body, or maybe not the whole body, maybe just from your brain to your arm, or back if it was a sensory neuron. So we got to make this a distinction between neurons and nerves. A neuron is the individual unit that makes up the nervous system. So neurons are like the words, and then the words make up the book, right? And so the neurons are the things that make up the nervous system. Nerves are made up of lots of neurons. So you've got a neuron, which is made up of a nerve, and lots of neurons, or sorry, you've got a nerve, pardon me, that's made up of a neuron, and then lots of neurons together, right, make a nerve, and then lots of nerves in a network make your nervous system. So if we were to kind of zoom in on the structures of neurons themselves, you've got a couple pieces we'll talk about. Dendrites, axons, the cell body itself, myelin sheath, nodes of Ranvier, and then axon terminals. Okay, so let's go through each. Now, you might see a cell with the cell body on the right. You might see the cells reversed with the cell body on the left. It really doesn't matter. Labels are the same. So you've got your nucleus inside of the cell body. That's the main portion of the neuron. Neurons are cells, so they've got nucleuses in them. The dendrites extend outside of the cell body, and they receive information from receptors or other neurons. So the dendrites are going to be like little fingers that are feeling for the information, and they're sensing the information coming into the neuron. The nucleus then processes that information inside of the cell body and decides what it's going to do with it. So if it transmits it, it's going to transmit it along this long axon. Now the axon is this long extension that's coming out of the nucleus and going to take that signal to other places. At the end of the axon are nerve endings, and these nerve endings, every single one of these contain synaptic vesicles, we'll call them. A vesicle is like a sac, and it holds stuff. And in this case, the synaptic vesicles on the nerve endings are going to be holding neurotransmitters, and we'll talk about what those are, but they're basically chemical messengers. They're the taxi cabs of the nervous system. Now you'll notice that this axon extending from this cell body has these weird looking sausage links on them, right? This is called a myelin sheath, and it's basically a fatty protection. It's an insulation. It stops the signal, the electrical signal, from being lost or somehow reduced due to degradation. And so much the same as how electrical wires have like a plastic or rubber jacket or covering over them, the myelin operates exactly the same. You've got an electrical signal traveling through this axon, and it needs to get to a destination, and we don't want to lose that signal or have it weakened in any way, so then we cover it in this insulation, this myelin sheath. Inside of the myelin sheath are many, many Schwann cells. So myelin sheath are simply made up of cells called Schwann cells. Between each sausage link, so between each covered section of myelin, there are little gaps. And these gaps, or the actual links of the sausage, if you will, are portions of the axon that are not covered by the myelin. They're not insulated. So what happens is the signal actually jumps. So it goes from the nucleus and gets transmitted down the axon. But when the electrical signal actually moves down the axon, it doesn't move through the entire axon. It jumps from node of Ranvier, these gaps, from node to node to node to node to node to destination at the nerve endings. So it doesn't need to travel throughout the whole thing. So these nodes of Ranvier actually provide a jumping point or a trampoline where we can move the signal very quickly, and in between, the myelin covered sections are insulated so we don't have a loss of signal. So this is called saltatory conduction, or it's the transmission or conduction of electrical signals through the axon or along the length of the axon by jumping along these nodes of Ranvier. Separating the nodes of Ranvier are the myelin sheath, which are made up of these Schwann cells. The larger the diameter of the axon, the faster the nerve transmission is going to go. So really small nerves don't transmit signals as quickly as large nerves. So in this case, we always go from the cell body to the nerve endings. So that's the direction of nerve impulse in this case. So I'm just going to finish off this first video here by describing some of the functions of what we just talked about. Dendrites receive information from receptors. The cell body contains the nucleus, which processes that information. The axon is the extension of the cell body, and it is actually going to transmit the impulse, the electrical impulse. The myelin sheath is a fatty protein used for insulation, and it helps increase the speed of the impulse. We call it white matter. And then Schwann cells are what make the myelin sheath, or make the insulation. Nodes of Ranvier are the gaps between Schwann cells, and those are what allow the jumping of the saltatory conduction of that nerve transmission through the axon. Neurolemma wasn't on the last slide, but it promotes the regeneration of axons. So the reason why you can lose a finger, have it completely chopped off, and if you get it back to a hospital in time, depending on how it was cut, they can reattach it, and you can almost gain complete motor control over time and lots of physiotherapy, is because the neurolemma allows that uh, it's the process and the portion of cells that allows for regeneration of damaged axons. The reason why central nervous system, so brain and spinal cord injuries, are so dangerous, so permanent, and you can't really recover from them is because they don't have neurolemma, so they can't regrow or regenerate. They don't heal. So peripheral nervous system nerves have neurolemma. They are more likely to heal than central nervous system nerves with damage. And the nerve endings or axon endings are the little projections at the end of the axon that contain the synaptic vesicles, which have neurotransmitters inside of them. And the neurotransmitters are the messengers which are going to tell other nerves and neurons to do certain things or don't do certain things. They can either be inhibitory or they can be excitatory. We'll talk about that in the next video. Myelin sheath, again, just a nice little insulating covering. So here's another picture of that. And then the speed of a nerve transmission, again, we've already said this, is increased by larger axon diameter. So the larger it is, the better it is for transmission. And if it has a myelin sheath, it's also faster at transmitting information. Okay. So the myelin sheath insulates to prevent the loss of charge and signal. So it increases the speed of transmission, and it's made up of Schwann cells which wrap around the axon. The nodes of Ranvier are little pockets between the sausage links, and they just let you bounce through saltatory conduction, the signal. There are gaps between the myelin sheath, and it has to do with the repolarization, depolarization of the cell. We won't talk about that until a couple of videos from now, but this is called saltatory conduction. Neurolemma allows for healing. It's found in the peripheral nervous system. If something's considered white matter, it has neurolemma. If it's considered gray matter, it doesn't have neurolemma. So the brain and spinal cord is primarily made up of gray matter because it lacks neurolemma. Okay, so there's three types of neurons: sensory neurons, motor neurons, and interneurons, and we'll describe these in more detail in the next video. Thanks, guys.